This is the tutorial for the Littlehampton dress. If you don't already have the pattern, the link is in the description. We're going to start with the bodice front and side fronts. So I've laid the front panel down. I've got my two side front panels here. Place them right sides together. Pop some pins in. Find the notches. Oh, they are tiny. Okay, that's the first side pin, so we need to pin the other side similarly. Set right sides together. Pop some pins in. Find those notches. We're ready to stitch. Centimetre from the raw edge. All my seam allowances are 1 centimetre unless otherwise stated in the pattern. Little back tack. Off we go. Ease those curves together as you go. They should be nice and easy to join up as there's just the 1 centimetre seam allowance. Not too much bulk there. Back tack at the end. There we go. 2 seams. I'm going to snip into those just to create a little bit of movement so that it smooths nicely over the bust. Always wise to make a toile when you're using a pattern for the first time to make sure that it fits your curves nicely. You'll get a much better fit if you do that. There we go, there's our little snips in there. And as I've overlocked it, you'll see that I've pulled those snips open so that the seam is nice and mobile. I'm going to press those seams to the front towards the middle of the bodice, and it looks all nice and crisp. Now we're going to stitch the side backs to the front. Match those side seams. This bodice kind of scoops out towards the back, so the longest side of the side back panel goes to the front. We're going to stitch that centimetre seam allowance again, quick back tack all the way down. There's the centimetre. I'm going to overlock that, give it a press. That's our side backs. So now we've got the back panel. This is what we're going to do the shirring on. I've got the top edge here. I'm going to just fold it and fold it 5mm by 5mm and stitch right on the edge. There we go, straight stitch. There's the hem. Just give it a press. We're ready to start the shirring. So the first job for the shirring is to hand wind your bobbin with the shirring elastic. There we go, this is a bit fiddly, but once you get started it's fine. Wind, wind, wind. Don't stretch it as you wind, do it nice and loosely and chop it off. Now my shirring, I needed more than 1 bobbin. I needed 1 and a little bit. I had a couple of extra rows that I needed out of another bobbin, so it's worth winding 2 while you're there. Pop it through all its tensions. Line the edge of the foot up with the top edge of your panel and just stitch. It's on a long stitch, the longest stitch, mine's a 5. Pull those elastics and threads right out so you've got plenty of tail on there, because obviously the elastic will kind of ping back a little bit. Check it's all stretchy. That's my first row. So now we're going to do the next row, and I'm going to lay my foot next to that first row of stitching, stretching it out gently as I go, and basically just keep going until you get almost to the bottom of your panel. There you go, you can see I've gone all the way down, except I've left quite a bit at the bottom. I've left all the hairy bits on, nice and stretchy. Don't chop your hairy bits off, give it a steam, that just compresses it a bit more, makes it look a bit neater. Now if we look at that bottom edge, you can see I've left a couple of centimetres there, so I've got a centimetre seam allowance to turn up, plus there's a little bit extra room to manoeuvre. Next we're going to attach this sheared panel into the back of our bodice, so I'm turning it over, line up all those hairy bits, so we'll need to get those in our seam, catch them with the stitching. So leaving the 1 centimetre seam allowance at the top, I'm matching that edge, top edge, and then fiddling with the sides here to pin and match the seams, pulling those threads across so they'll catch into that seam, and all that stitching will help to hold it all down. There we go, 1 centimetre from the edge, starting a centimetre from the top, back tack, and I've put my machine on a slightly smaller stitch now, and I'm going to do sort of back tacking as I go. Again, just in a bid to try and secure those little elastics as much as possible so they don't pop out. You can always just do a straight stitch downwards and just go down 2 or 3 times instead of doing the fancy back tacking. So there you go, you can see they're all caught into that stitching. Oops, there's a little one there, let's pull that out. And also, as an extra security, you can tie them off, especially the elastics, or sew them in to just secure them and stop them coming free. Just going to tie a couple off here to show you. One, it's a little bit fiddly, but it just helps to add another level of security. And then we're going to overlock it so it's all neat. So that's what it should look like when it's done. And you do that for the other side as well, starting the centimetre down. Oh, a few stragglers. Lovely. Now it's time to do the ties. If you have a preferred method for making these, then obviously use that. This is just how I'm going to do them. Quick pin, centimetre off the top, centimetre from the sides, and leave the other end open. Here we go. And then across the top. You can always pivot there if you prefer. That's it. Now we're just going to give the corner a little trim off. Turn it through. It's not very bulky, this fabric, but I'll just thin it out a little bit at the end. That's it. And then I've got to fiddle this through. I'm just going to use my scissors because they're not too long. There we go. Through it goes. Put it through. I'll get a pin and pick those corners out. That's it. Just tease those out, and then you want to sort of roll that side hem, side seam even between your fingers just to open that up a bit. Give it a good press. There you go, that's one. Repeat for the other 3. Facing next. This is the front facing. You can't really see very well, but I have interfaced it. And then we've got these are my back facings, they're interfaced too, so right sides together. Pop a pin in, centimetre seam allowance, quick stitch. There we go. Now we're going to press these open. There we go, so it's not too bulky, and then we're going to overlock or zigzag around the edge. Just to neaten it, there it goes. Done. So here we go. We're going to pop the straps onto the facing. This just means that they're secured down. Here we go, 1 centimetre seam allowance from here, from the armhole in. Pop a pin in there. Same on the other side. And here again, leave your seam allowance, your 1 centimetre, and again on the back. Now I'm just going to stitch them with a big stitch just to hold them in place. It just means that when you come to put your facing onto your bodice, there's one less thing to have to control while you're doing it. There we go, just a big stitch, just tacked on. Bit easier to manage than having lots of pins in. Okay, so now we're going to attach this facing to the bodice. It's already got our straps on, so we need to match the corners. We're just going to do this first row at the front here, corner to corner. Pop a pin in the middle. Incidentally, if you're worried about your neckline stretching at any point, you can put a stay stitch in it first, or you can pop a bit of interfacing on the actual neckline, not just the facing. There we go, we've done the centimetre stitch just across the front to start with, and now I'm going to roll that seam allowance back towards the facing, and I'm going to stitch on the edge there. You can always press it first if that helps you. And I've started sort of halfway along my strap, so it's not quite at the end, and then I'm pulling that seam allowance upwards towards the facing, stitching along and stopping again sort of halfway along my strap there, so that I don't get all confused when it comes to stitching the rest of the facing on. The stitching won't fight. That's one edge. Now I'm going to go back and pin the rest of the facing. So I start at the back there, match my seam allowances up, put a pin in, side seams, another pin, a pin for under the arm there. Make sure that seam allowance is going the right way, and I'm going to stitch the centimetre again. Quick back tack, centimetre all round under the arm and across the back. So there we go. Now I'm going to trim some of this excess away, pop some snips in there so that it can open up under the arm and lie nice and flat. Trim away any excess seam allowances. Not a great deal of bulk on this, but it all helps for it to lie nice and crisply. There you go, you can see it can open. So again, when I'm doing the top stitching here, I'm pulling that seam allowance up towards the facing, press if it helps, and then I'm going to stitch on that edge again. So I'm going to start as close as I can to the strap, but it's always a bit of a fiddle into the corners, so I'll be starting a little bit back from that corner. Quick back tack, pull that seam allowance up, check that it's all up the right way, and stitch on the edge. Back tack to finish. Let's have a look at that. So I've pulled it through, That's how it's going to look. It needs a nice press. But you can see how it's finishing the edge nicely. So here it is pressed, looking nice and crisp. You can see the nice shaping under the arms there. And what we've got left is that little loose bit at the back where the facing meets the shearing. So what you need to do is just tuck under that seam allowance that we've got left there. And you can either machine stitch it down, or I quite like just a little hand stitch just across there, a little whipping stitch. Okay, so let's start on the skirt. This is the skirt side seam, so this is the shortest edge on the skirt panels. Just match the sides up. If you've got a pattern like I have, make sure that it's going the correct way. So just pin your sides. I'm going to stitch a centimetre down each side seam. A quick back tack at the start, and off we go. There we are, simple seam. Just needs an overlock or a zigzag to finish. There we go, and then give it a press. There we are, 2 side seams on our skirt. Pop that to one side for the moment. Now we've got the frill. Again, the short seams are the ones we're doing, so it's the short sides together. Make sure your pattern's the right way up. Centimetre on each side. Make sure your panels are flat as well, that you've got a nice circle, you haven't got it all twisted. Back tack, straight down the 1 centimetre, back tack, overlock and press. There we go, we've got 2 frill panels joined together. So we're going to pop some gathering threads in. My chosen method is to stitch on the largest stitch a centimetre in from the edge, and then I go back and do another row of stitching sort of between the centimetre and the raw edge, so in theory about 5mm. You can always use a thicker thread on your bobbin. That's the one that you always pull up for gathers, the bobbin thread, if you're worried that your threads might break. Again, this fabric's very light, so I'm just using my regular thread here. There we are, 2 rows on the biggest stitch. Now I'm going to put the gathers in for the frill as well. We've just done the top of the skirt. This is the top of the frill, and then the bottom of the frill I'm going to hem just by turning and turning. So gathers first. First row, centimetre away from the edge. Second row, 1/2 centimetre away from the edge. Now I'm going to just do the hem. So I've just turned it 5mm and 5mm, stitching on the edge. This is obviously not the edge with the gathers on the other edge. There we go. So we've got gathering threads on one edge of our frill, and we've got a nice hem on the other. Give it a press. So we've got a nicely pressed hem, and we've got our gathers. Let's put those together. So this is my frill. I'm just going to match these side seams, and I'm going to mark the quarters. So the side seams are the halves, and then I've folded it in half again, side seams together. And I'm going to put some pins in to match the quarters so that I know when I'm gathering I'm putting the same amount of fabric into each quarter of the skirt and the frill. That's my quarters. You can mark with a pencil or a safety pin or whatever you want. now the skirt. So the gathering edge of the skirt goes to the bodice, so we want the edge that doesn't have the gathering threads in. Find the side seams and match side seam to side seam. So side seam of my frill matches to the side seam of my skirt. Match those seams, pop a pin in. Then I need to find the other side seam. Side seam there, side seam there. That's it. Pin those together nicely. And then I need to fold my skirt at the side seams just to find the quarters there to match to the quarters on the frill. I just put my side seams together, pull that out, that's where my quarters are. I'll put some pins in there so I can match those to the pins on the frill. You can always do eighths if you choose, if you want to have it really spot on. Quarters is fine, I find. That's it, that's the quarters on the skirt. So where's my quarter pin? There's my quarter pin on my frill. Find my quarter pin on my skirt. There it is. Put them together. That's the quarters. Do the same on the other side for the other quarter as well. And then we can start pulling up some gather threads. There we are, there's our other quarter pin. Okay, so that gives us some idea of how much fabric there is that needs to be gathered in. So I'll find those threads. Always pull up using the bobbin thread. A little bit of a fiddle to get it started, but once you've got the edge, there we go. Once we've got the ends of that thread, we're off. Pull them up evenly, both together. And just pull the gathers through gently until that frill is the same length as the fabric of the skirt. There we go, just even the gathers out as much as possible. There we go, and then you just pin that so that that's the same length now. Pop some pins in, try and even out those gathers as you go really. You can fiddle for ages. And then it's the centimetre seam allowance to sew the frill to the skirt. So it should come out just about on that bottom gather thread. So again, you might want to just tease the gathers a little bit as you go. Go all around the frill. So there we go, that's all stitched on. Take all those pins out. I'm going to overlock the edge of mine. You can zigzag if you choose. Neaten it up nicely. There we are, nice and neat. That's one frilled skirt. We just need to attach the skirt to the bodice next. So we're going to gather and attach our skirt now to our bodice. So again, side seam to side seam, find our quarters. Pop some pins in, mark with a pencil or some chalk, safety pin. There we go, that's my quarters. Now I need to do the same for the bodice. which is slightly more tricky because of the shearing. So I want to match the side seams together and then pull it one way. That's the centre front, so I need a pin in there. And the other side I need to sort of pull out these shearing frilly bits so that they're flat, so I can find the centre. That's it, that's the centre at the back, so I pop a pin in there. That's my quarters done. Just need to find and match them on my skirt now. So side seams together. Side seam skirt. Side seam bodice. Together and pin. Next one, side seam skirt and side seam bodice and pin together. Centre back pin, centre back pin, match those up, pin them together. Now for this back panel I'm just going to stretch this out so that they're flat, they're sewn together flat. There are no gathers because the shearing will pull that skirt up into gathers anyway. So if you don't want it to be too bulky at the back, flatten that bit out and just put your gathers in the unsheared panels, centre front to centre front. Pin those together, and then I'm going to even the gathers out, pull up those threads again and get those gathers as evenly distributed as I can around the remaining panels that aren't sheared. So like I said, that shearing will pull up the skirt anyway and gather it in, but you'll end up with just a bit too much fullness in one area if you put all the gathers in there too. So pulling that up until the skirt is the same length as the bodice and just evening out those gathers there as I go. Pop some pins in and then you're ready to put them together. So stitching a centimetre again once you're all gathered up and ready to go. Tuck everything in, make sure you don't catch it in the seams. We're nearly there. There we go. Nice even pleats. Let's get stitching. It's the centimetre. Here we go. I'm starting at the flat bit at the back, so that the bit that doesn't have the gathers, and then just sew all the way around that centimetre from the edge. So there we go, just needs a zigzag or an overlock to neaten it up, and then we're done. That's it, much neater. Don't forget to give it a press. You can always steam the the gathering as well, which makes it lie nicely. But that is basically one dress. You can tie your ties up. There you go, job done. Enjoy.